Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we are committed to three basic principles: truth, freedom, and hope. But one of the realities of the world today is that we have to be very careful how and where we speak some of that truth. So if my next guest and I seem like we're perhaps dancing around issues a little bit delicately, well, it's because we are. Rest assured, though, I am also doing a deep dive with my next guest where there will be no rules because it'll go up on Rumble and we can say what we actually believe to be true. So keep an eye out for that. But for today, we are going to have to be a little bit careful as we welcome Dr. Naomi Wolf to the Aussie Wire. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you again.
Hey, look, you were you were everywhere really for a couple of months there. People were talking about the incredible work that you're doing in researching the Pfizer papers. That's what we can't talk about today. So I thought I'd start with some hard-hitting journalism, the kind of journalism that YouTube would approve of, and say, Naomi, how's the weather where you are?
It's been muggy, but seasonable for September. Thank you, Topher.
And now that we've done the weather, let's talk about sport. How's that Novak Djokovic guy? What do you reckon?
Well, I'm awfully glad to see him, and it's nice that he's a victor. And I also am noting how, and I'll say this in a circumspect way to suit the new era we're in. It's notable how quickly legacy media forgot the vilification that he sustained not 2 full years ago, as I recall.
Well, of course, that all happened in my own home city of Melbourne, and it was an absolutely disgraceful stain on our conscience, as so much of what happened during that era was. But I do feel like Melbourne did somewhat redeem itself, because the following year, when he walked out onto centre court, he got a thunderous ovation, the like of which is rare, even in the world of elite sports. Getting to something a bit more serious, you're a journalist with decades of experience. You're an author. You're an incredibly influential figure in culture. So this is not new ground for you. You're very familiar with all of this territory. What do you make of the changes and the shifts that we've seen, where we have to be careful in the first place? I mean, what's happening here that this dynamic even has to exist?
Well, it's hard to talk about censorship in a condition of censorship. I guess I'd highlight what I'm about to say by noting that, and I think it's important for people to realize this because it gives them hope, but the barriers you're describing are not universal. I talk to people around the world, and some countries like Canada are, I mean, a hair's breadth away from Poland in 1972. I mean, completely almost locked down, like ideologically tyrannical regime with barely a vestige of the robust democracy, free speech, civil rights that country boasted 3 years ago. Australia, literally gives me nightmares. Australia, New Zealand, I worry about all day long. You guys are always in my heart. And the dancing around things that we're doing, people have to do it for the same reasons, to not be canceled on some platforms, and then we get to say what we want to say on other platforms. But the penalties that are allowed in a civil society in Australia are far more severe than they've managed to establish in the United States. There are a lot of reasons for that. And I don't mean to be smug or not compassionate, but I just want to say that because I want to give hope, if I can, to the people of Australia and New Zealand that there are ways to fight this tyranny. And just because they say it has to be the case doesn't mean it has to be the case. And the last thing I really want to give some space to, if we can, is The Voice, which I've been following to some extent. And I just want to, again, subjectively, I'm not Australian, I'm not Aboriginal, obviously, but I do want to say generally that I want to tell Australians to beware, whether they're Aboriginal or not Aboriginal, be careful, be wary, because what I'm seeing around the world, and it's so clever, and I'm seeing it in the United States, is that these evildoers who want to create a global tyranny are creating wedge issues that allow them to crush civil liberties, or basically to kind of rewrite or upend the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, or whatever the Australian equivalent is, in Canada, the Charter of Rights, by playing on Western nations' guilt about, legitimate guilt about, the legitimate atrocities of colonialism or colonial oppression. So we see it with, Black Lives Matter, I'm a staunch anti-racist. Black lives do matter, but the theatrical release of Black Lives Matter, which I've seen the money flow was funded by many shell entities that were not, organic to the United States civil rights movement, was followed by defund the police, and that led to a catastrophic breakdown of safety and civil society and just livability in our cities, horribly impacting Black and brown women and children, most of all. But I guess where I'm going with this, and we see it in the schools, the kind of replacement of like algebra and history and social studies and civics with discourses about our racist past. And, we have a racist past. I don't doubt that. But what's being used is that these the fact of our racism in the past, right, is being used to erase history, to make it completely socially unacceptable to be proud of being American or Australian or a New Zealander or, French or British or whatever. And it's very convenient. And in your case, to in a wholesale way to rewrite your laws. So it's very, very dangerous. And I just want to kind of cheer people on to remember that it is not necessarily racist. You don't have to be racist. You can be an anti-racist, still be proud of your country, still be proud of your history, acknowledge the shortcomings of all of our nations, but not be bullied into guilted into accepting a loss of everyone's civil liberties and rule of law, because these bad people want to use our issues as a Trojan horse to destroy our democracies.
As a wedge to divide us. Now, you mentioned there freedom of speech. I want to draw people's attention to an event that you're speaking at shortly that I think will be of great interest to Australians. As soon as I get a live stream link for this event, it's in Rochester, New York. I will be putting that live stream up on all of my own socials at Topher Field, as well as all the Aussie Wire socials. Dr Naomi Wolf, you're one of the speakers there. Dr Robert Malone, MD. Jeffrey Tucker, founder of the Brownstone Institute, great guy. I've interviewed him twice. He has amazing bow ties. Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Ryan Cole. What an incredible lineup, and a lineup unlike what we're going to see in Australia, certainly this year, for all of the reasons that we've just discussed. From your perspective, there's a big argument here in Australia around a Bill of Rights. There are limitations and flaws with the Bill of Rights. Sometimes once you write down these rights, everything not written down is then automatically excluded. It goes into the hands of courts, etc., to decide what that means. But then again, if you don't have a Bill of Rights, well, would you be able to say what you're saying without the US Bill of Rights, do you think?
Well, it worries me. I wasn't aware that there was, like, the way you just described it, I wasn't aware that things had gotten that granular. And that's, again, really scary. I mean, I have felt from the, March of 2020, April of 2020, when your parliament was disbanded. And I wrote a tweet saying, can someone tell me in 130 words or less who's in charge of Australia? And I got like piled on by bots and trolls, which is a wonderful signal to a reporter that there's a story there. But Australia has been, in my view, a petri dish. I said this when we last spoke, like a demo for the rest of the world. Like if they can do it to Australia, then they can export it to the rest of the world. And so I'm very worried to hear that there's a debate about your Bill of Rights, because
we don't have
there
one.
Shouldn't be a debate.
That we don't have a debate about Bill of Rights. Yeah, about actually creating one. Do you believe that the only reason you're able to do things like speak at these events alongside people like Pierre Corey and Dr. Robert Malone, et cetera, is because the First Amendment exists? Do you think you would have that right were it not for that?
Certainly. I mean, I can't overstate how important the First Amendment has been. People think it's about speech. It's not just about speech. It's literally about everything else that follows in terms of liberty. And when we're looking at, like, the lights go down in Canada, in Western Europe, in Britain, which was, the originator of the ideals of free speech and civil society, in Australia and New Zealand, it's literally only the First Amendment that allows us to do all the things that defend other liberties. For example, the First Amendment has allowed many good lawsuits that had impacts beyond speech, like taking masks off of travelers, or forbidding, taking gag orders off of doctors in Canada, or forbidding my governor here in New York State from opening a quarantine camp. You have to use speech to protect your body and your children's bodies in other ways. And I can't stress enough how important that is, which is, again, back to my point about using our racist past to oppress us. In Canada, they managed to whittle down their freedom of speech rights through hate speech legislation.
Sure.
And I was like, no, because the minute everyone can agree, yes, that's hate speech, but it's the camel's nose inside the tent, right? We all don't like hearing Nazi rhetoric. I don't like it. I'm the granddaughter of a woman who lost 9 siblings to the Nazis, but the ultimate goal is what Jews did in marching for the right of Nazis in Skokie, Illinois, to have speech, because Jews understood that if we have to hear speech we don't like in order for everyone's rights to be protected. So I'm really interested that you're having a Bill of Rights discussion. I'm always worried about it. I'm worried that they'll create a Bill of Rights that is actually diminishes your rights, because that's where everything's gone so far. Yeah. And the last thing I want to say about what I'm worried about, and I'm sorry to talk much about this, but as I said, I'm so preoccupied with Australia, and so what you're telling me is like really important to me and dear to my heart. In our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, it says that all the rights that are not enumerated go back to the states. So basically, every right, you have every right, and the Bill of Rights carves out specific rights that are enumerated at a federal level. If your Bill of Rights doesn't say everything that's not enumerated here goes back to the equivalent of the states in Australia, it's a bad proposal. Right, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be told, everything that's in the Bill of Rights are all the rights you're going to get. It doesn't work that way. It has to work the other way. In a free society.
That's food for thought. Thank you so much, Dr. Wolf. Thank you for your work. We're going to sign off from this recording. We're going to hit record again, and we're going to talk all about the things that we can't talk about. That will go up as soon as possible into the insiders. So those of you that are Aussie Wire insiders, don't worry, you'll get that pretty much straight away. And for everybody else, we're going to figure out where we can release that, where we're not going to get ourselves penalised, and we'll let you know where to find that in the coming weeks once that goes up. Dr. Wolf, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.